Hello everyone, this is Chewy, and I'm doing a little bit of a channel reset here. This is going to be a long form type of video about why Gears of War Reloaded, the new original Gears of War remake, and the second time the original Gears of War has been remade, why that does not fit very well into what I would call the modern shooter video game landscape, as you can probably see in the title. And the gameplay in the background is primarily footage from Weekend 1 of the Gears of War Reloaded multiplayer beta recorded on an Xbox Series S with console-only crossplay, and it's basically just team deathmatch matches because, to my knowledge, that's all that's available at the moment. And I'm going to be talking about a few different things. Those would include my critiques of this beta we have so far. And I know that I can't judge the entire game by the beta, but let's be honest, a lot of betas these days for multiplayer games basically are the full game, just with some of the maps and modes removed. The very little changes from beta to full release these days. But regardless, I will keep it as fair as possible and remind everyone, including myself, to keep in mind that, again, this is just a beta. And also, I guess, to have full disclosure and full honesty, I only played maybe 10 matches. I'm only around rank 5, but the thing is, I have played so much of this game, either in the Ultimate Edition remake from about a decade ago, or just straight up the original version from 2006, if I recall correctly, because I believe its 25th anniversary is next year, 2026, which would mean, yeah, so I am a hardcore OG Gears of War fan, longtime fan of player of the series. And I got the original Gears of War the day it came out for my Xbox 360. The disc, too. Remember when we had discs instead of everything being primarily digital? Yeah, I'm old enough to remember that. I'm basically a boomer at this point. But anyways, I have a lot of fond memories of playing the original Gears of War, as well as pretty much all the ones that came after that, but especially what I would call the OG trilogy made by Epic Games, truly an epic studio. But yeah, sorry. So, yeah, I have a lot of experience with this series. Pretty much all the games in the series I've probably put several dozen, if not well over 100 hours into some of them. And, back in the day when I was a teenager first playing this stuff, I remember taking my KD ratio very seriously, taking my ranked win-loss ratio very seriously, and I really hadn't played any Gears of War in quite a while prior to this Reloaded beta coming out, because the last Gears of War release, I guess if you don't count Tactics, which is like a whole other type of game, I don't consider it essential release in the Gears of War franchise, but the last new Gears game was Gears 5 in 2019, if I recall correctly, and it's kind of, Gears 5 has become the black sheep of the franchise. I'm in a Gears of War Facebook fan group, and every time Gears 5 is brought up, it is usually to be ridiculed and mocked and put down as being by far the worst game in the series. And now, do I agree with that? Not really. I mean, I would put it above Gears of War Judgment at least, but to be fair, Judgment was a spin-off, and Gears 5 was meant to be a significant continuation of the main story with the characters we all know and love. And There's a lot of reasons why people don't like Gears 5. Some I disagree with, some I think are valid, but I'm not here to do some massive retrospective of the entire series. I just wanted to give some context as to where I'm coming from when I play this new Gears of War Reloaded game, and how I view the series in general. And I will say it simply is an amazing series. It was a foundational series to my taste in video games, particularly shooter games. And it kind of also made the Xbox become my core gaming platform of choice. I've basically stuck with Xbox ever since the 360 days and all the way until today, where now I own a Series X and a Series S. And I guess with all that out of the way, I just want to say one more thing about this channel and the future of this channel and what I'm attempting to do here. This channel has gone through multiple phases in the past. Some of you who are still subscribed to me from from years ago may remember the Shrek Stories days, may have been around as well for some of the other gaming and music related days. But I'm hoping to have a clean slate here, hoping to be able to get monetized potentially if I actually start pumping out these videos like I want to. And yeah, again, with that out of the way, let's dive into more about Gears of War Reloaded specifically. So, okay. My number one, or maybe not my number one complaint, but my first complaint about this new remake is the gameplay is still as clunky as it was all the way back on Xbox 360. And now, they've ironed out a lot of the glitches. They've added a few minor quality of life features, but that doesn't really help that the general core features, particularly the cover system and how wall bouncing works compared to later entries in the series, later as in after the original Gears of War, how they would improve that, among other things. It makes it feel like this Reloaded game, at least in its beta form, which I don't expect to change very much for full release. It makes it feel dated in a way that you could argue is nostalgic, sure, for a lot of people, but it's like, I don't think it is going to appeal much to newer players. And now, I know some people might jump down my throat and be like, but wait, Chewy, we don't want them to pander to noobs or to pander to casuals. But the thing is, if we want this game to actually survive and thrive and have a healthy player base for years to come, or at least until E-Day comes out, the game has to have some appeal beyond the hardcore fans, especially when you consider that the hardcore fans will be playing this for the third time in terms of how many releases this specific game has had. And if those core fans, myself included, are not satisfied with the cover system, with the wall bouncing system, with all the core gameplay, then they're not really going to want to stick around very long, because you can only run on or bank on nostalgia so much. I mean, our nostalgia has already been milked to death with Gears of War Ultimate Edition, and so a lot of people were expecting a remastered Gears of War trilogy, not just the first one, or at least a remaster of 2 and 3, which have never been remastered before. And instead, they gave us another Gears of War original remaster. And you really have to question what was the thought process with this, especially if this quote-unquote second or really third time around is not going to have significant gameplay changes. And like, honestly, I can't tell many differences even just between Reloaded and Ultimate Edition. Between Reloaded and Ultimate Edition. Like, you know, they kept the points showing up on screen. They kept the I don't even know what else. That's like all I can think of. They kept the hollow lacking numerical ranking system, and like that was another point I wanted to touch on, is that the progression system, at least from what we're seeing in the beta, feels very underwhelming. And normally I would give them the benefit of the doubt and be like, well, okay, they're probably going to expand on it in the full release. But for a lot of Gears of War games that have had ranking systems, they haven't really done that. You know, they've introduced the re-up system, which is basically just a copycat of Call of Duty's Prestige system that was introduced with COD 4 back in 2007. But the thing is, this just doesn't feel like a very satisfying method of leveling up. It's just numbers, and sometimes the numbers reset. And unlike Call of Duty, I don't think Gears of War has ever had a proper camo grind or a grind for unlocking anything all that significant beyond maybe a few characters or I don't even know what else. Like, there's challenges, badges or something, like badges to show off the challenges you completed. But I don't know. Like, on one hand, I want to say maybe Gears of War needs some kind of mastery camo grind akin to recent Call of Duty games. But on the other hand, I also don't want Gears of War to just turn into a soulless camo grinding simulator where that's all any of the players care about. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you do introduce that, it could definitely bring in more of those players who like that style of long, high-effort grinds. But on the other hand, we've seen so much of that in recent FPS or just shooter games in general, and it's getting pretty exhausting, especially when you have so many other games and so many other hobbies and applications in general competing for our attention. I think that in a certain sense, the lack of excessive progression gives the game a more simplistic, basic feel, but not basic in a derogatory way, just basic in a way that people who are old enough to remember what the gaming era was like when the original Gears of War came out can appreciate. And I'm very much of that demographic, of that generation. Honestly, there's a certain part of me that almost wants them to just completely scrap any kind of ranking system and simply have old school leaderboards, and that would be, just like the original Gears of War as well. But I fear that if they do that, they will really alienate a lot of people by not having any kind of grind whatsoever beyond just your stats. And also, given that this has crossplay for the first time in the series, if I recall correctly, but definitely crossplay for the first time with a Gears of War original remake, I think, unfortunately, if things were all based around leaderboards, PC players would kind of open the floodgates for cheating to overtake the top spots, which would render the whole leaderboard system essentially meaningless. But at the very least, you'd think they could add some kind of combat record. So anyways, yeah, gameplay clunky, progression feels lacking and hollow. How would I remedy this without introducing a soulless camo grind? Well, that's hard to say. It would probably have to be some balance of unlocking camos, unlocking characters, and unlocking other things that would have more meaning than just stupid, wacky cosmetics, which is a whole other part of this critique or analysis or whatever you call it that I'm going to get into later. Now, third critique. Really just the question of, why was this even remade again? Now, I think the obvious answer comes down to really three things. One, there hasn't been a significant Gears of War release in several years. Two, there's a lot of nostalgia for this game, so it's kind of a guaranteed bit of money from at least those very hardcore old school fans who have still stuck around all these years. And three, they are adding some, updated modern gaming type features like crossplay with PlayStation and PC. Also 120 frames per second in multiplayer and 60 frames per second on console and campaign, which is great, of course. But besides that, again, tying back into the whole, like, why didn't they just remake 2 and 3, or even just, like, remaster 2 and 3 and bundle them with a slightly upgraded version of Ultimate Edition with those aforementioned 120 FPS and crossplay features instead of going to the lengths to remake the original game again. But regardless, I'm personally happy to have anything new in the core Gears of War series. You know, Gears of War Tactics just didn't do it for me. It wasn't anything like what the series made me fall in love with originally and throughout its course so far. However, I will say I am much, much more excited for Gears of War E-Day in 2026 than I am for this Reloaded game that is coming next month in August. However, I will definitely be playing it, probably for a good bit. I'll probably sink a few dozen hours into it at least this year alone. But, you know, it remains to be seen if it will really have legs, if it will, like I said, keep a healthy, thriving player base. And if it does, going into 2026 and even beyond, then I could see myself putting a lot of time into it. But anyways, I'll move on to my hopes for the full game. Short list, but so I already touched on the return of the re-up feature, which I'm sure we'll be seeing, and I just hope it's more rewarding than the re-up feature in previous Gears of War games. Okay, so here's a potentially hot take. I think they need to bring back the version of Annex, aka King of the Hill, where it is not execution style. Enemies don't need to be executed and you can finish them off from any distance with any weapon. And to kind of tie in with that, I really hope we see the return of Warzone. I'm not sure what the last Gears of War game that had Warzone either in addition to or instead of execution was. It may have been the last one for all I know, but I just know that I have a craving to play Warzone and really test out, you know, my quote-unquote skill. And I'm not a particularly skilled player. I was at one point, but now I'm just a washed-up millennial boomer, and all I really like to do is chainsaw people and spam the Lancer to kind of troll people and piss people off. But regardless, I still think that Warzone, you know, the original version of Warzone, I'm not talking about no Call of Duty Warzone, I'm talking about Gears of War original Warzone, and I miss that. I feel like it takes more, or took more skill than people ever really realize. And I get why the execution style gameplay is much more popular, but I would love to see Warzone in the original version of Annex return. Pretty sure it was the original version of Annex that had the kill from any distance, didn't require to be executed. Didn't require enemies to be executed, that is. And I would liken it or compare it to hardcore modes in Call of Duty, where it's kind of like, people always say like, oh, like it's so unfair to have the advantage to be able to pick someone off from afar with your pistol or Lancer. But like the thing is, everyone has that advantage. It's not one-sided, it's not just one player or one whole team, it's every player on every team. So, you know, that balances things out in my opinion. Alright, maybe another potentially hot take. I think they should keep active downs for the long-shot sniper rifle, which, if you don't know, that basically just means that one active reloaded bullet hitting an enemy anywhere in the body causes them to go down. I know that was a pretty hated mechanic from the original. I'm pretty sure they even removed it or redid it in Ultimate Edition, but I would like to see that come back, at least for some modes. Like, maybe not every mode, but some modes would be nice. And, alright, yeah. So, here's one that I think is a lot less controversial. I want them to return the menus to their original gritty style. And now, I was going to give an example of this by getting gameplay from the actual original Gears of War, but I downloaded it and opened it and searched for a match in every possible way to search for one, and I was immediately met with no matches found, which I take it to mean that the original game is 110% dead, which is why it makes sense that they are doing another remake, or at least it's a small reason it makes sense that they're doing another remake, because I did find that Ultimate Edition still has enough people to find a match in it. But anyways, bringing back those gritty, more horror-esque aesthetic menus would be really nice, because ever since the original Gears of War, the games have just gotten more and more colorful, less and less disturbing, and again, gritty. And now moving on to my fears for the full game. Well, one thing I will say is the beta so far is utterly plagued with connection issues. The connection issues are really bad. Long matchmaking times, constant disconnects even mid-match, which is incredibly frustrating, of course. So if those aren't ironed out by the launch of the full game, I feel like that could really be disastrous for the initial full launch and tank the game's success. And another thing I feel like could tank the game's success would be having strict SBMM, aka skill-based matchmaking, as we've seen in Call of Duty since Modern Warfare 2019. And I want to clarify, I'm not a big SBMM hater. I actually think a certain degree of SBMM is necessary and important, because I think we've seen examples of why zero SBMM at all also causes a game to fail. I mean, I would say case in point, Ubisoft's XDefiant, which just got shut down this month. So yeah, another thing, battle passes, seasons, drip-fed lame content, all of which kind of tie together, go together. Now, specifically with battle passes, I want to say I'm not 100% against them, but I fear what they will do to a game like Gears of War, especially a remake of the original. I fear that they will introduce silly, immature, cringy character skins that are just very out of place with this particular series. You know, I know that Gears 5 had crossovers with Halo Reach, but I feel like that kind of makes sense. I mean, honestly, the Halo Reach characters that were in Gears 5 looked very similar to some of the soldier characters that were already in the Gears of War series, particularly the Carmine, so that didn't feel too out of place, that didn't feel too jarring. But, you know, this year we've seen the newest Call of Duty Black Ops 6, add everything from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to anime girls to, you know, glowing green demons and all that crap. And if I see stuff like that be forced into Gears of War going forward, I am going to crawl under a rock in a hole and cry my eyes out until I fall asleep. But seriously, like, that kind of stuff is just lame. And that also goes hand in hand with overpriced microtransactions, which we are seeing more and more in mainstream AAA shooter games. You know, Call of Duty is increasing the standard price for its bundles basically every year, where we're at the point where $30 is like the standard, which is kind of insane. And like, I admit I'm guilty of buying a good few of them, but I've quit recently, and I do not want to support that practice by buying them in Gears of War unless they have some really good, like, nostalgia pandering or some dream collabs. Like, I don't know, if they brought Doom Guy to Gears of War, like, I might shell out some dosh for that. And another couple of games where we've seen exorbitantly priced microtransactions destroy faith in consumers, or I guess more accurately, destroy consumers' faith in the games, have been XDefiant and Splitgate 2, both of which, if I recall correctly, had like cosmetic bundles priced all the way up to like $70 or $80 freaking dollars. What else am I worried about? I worry about the balancing of what I would call the dreaded two-piece, the melee followed up by a shotgun blast for an easy, quick kill, where the enemy can't really do anything because the initial melee stuns them for multiple seconds. That has always been annoying, and you could argue that, like, you know, it's a little bit hypocritical to complain about something like that when I talked about being in favor of bringing back active downs for the long shot. But again, I think it's something that could be on a kind of mode by mode or match by match or map by map or whatever, case by case basis, basically. Another fear, chainsaw being useless. Although I will say, based on my experience with the beta that so far, that does not seem like it's going to be the case. I mean, it's not great or anything, but it still isn't terribly difficult to get a few chainsaw kills a match, especially if you're playing carefully and kind of taking advantage of tagging along with teammates, so like your teammates can distract enemies trying to engage them with classic Gnasher duels, and then you can just come out of nowhere and chainsaw their butts off, and that's always really satisfying. And then this last point I wanted to make is kind of a joke, but like, imagine if they forgot to remove crab walking, like that classic glitch. Like, that would be really funny, but also like incredibly annoying at the same time. And I fully admit that I did some crab walking back in the day. Like, I don't feel very good about it now, but it's like, can you blame me? I was young, and it was just, everyone was doing it on the original Gears of War. And that covers most of what I wanted to talk about with regard to this new Gears of War Reloaded. There's one more thing I want to say, though. So, I have put footage in this video from not just the Gears of War Reloaded beta, but also from a few matches of Gears of War Ultimate Edition. And I want to genuinely ask my viewers, did you notice that? Did you notice any difference between those games besides which maps are available? Because I feel like they look almost identical. They look like exactly the same. So tell me if you picked up on that in the comments. Tell me what your thoughts on Gears of War Reloaded multiplayer beta is so far, if you've played it. And even if you haven't played it, are you looking forward to the full release? Are you getting it on Game Pass? Are you getting it because you already own Ultimate Edition? Are you just straight up buying it because you're that excited? Anyways, my name is Chewy, aka Chewy Ribbit, aka Chewy Kablooey. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Although I am going to be honest, I don't know when that will be. Peace.